it was long ago, and now it changed its mind. They're gonna fall, they're gonna pay. They're gonna strike out, they're gonna play.
And everybody say no war, no war. People in the street, no war, no war. They don't agree with the fact that the only response is a nuclear strike.
They call them love insurgent.
War, war,
The only world insane.
war,
The only thing that wanted.
war.
Do they even know what it means?
Yes, we score tonight.
They made all these promises. They're winters lies. They can't keep their promises. We all knew that. They made all these promises. They're winters lies. They can't keep their promises.
Hello everyone, this is Lori Smith on Spreaker. This is a show, a tribute to the addicted. It's called Choose Life. And this show, it's important to me to do this show tonight because someone that I know who's just a really dear friend of mine, and I won't name names, they know someone who's having a lot of trouble right now. And this person, this young man, is addicted and just on the streets and, nowhere to go. Probably burned all his bridges and has just made really such a mess of things. And so many people in society, look down on people who are drug addicted and, who are homeless or living on the streets or doing drugs, and, just the stigma really it's pretty harsh against them. Drug addiction has affected my life in every way, personally as well as externally, I guess you want to say. I know all about it. I chose life. I'm really glad that I did. And, it could be anybody, it could be anybody in this situation. And it's a hard road. It's definitely a hard road. So if you're listening to this show and you're struggling with drug addiction and you're just, you're just wondering how you're going to make it, I mean, choose life. That's all I have to. I mean, that's the best advice I can give, man. Because it's really a life of death. Drugs, and I know I was drug addicted. I was a young drug addict at the age of 12, and people who read my books and listen to my story and stuff know a lot about my own personal issues with drug abuse and whatnot. I'll turn up the volume a little bit. I struggled with just a whole lot of drug abuse, and I got off the drugs at the age of 21, roughly 21, 22, and by I would say really because I'm a Christian by the grace of God, but other people may not think it might be that, but it was just a desire to live. And I detail that all in my book, A Life of Death, The Redemption, and really just talking about the abuse that really led to my choice of doing drugs. And my siblings were addicted to drugs at a young age as well, and they were older than me, and I sort of just followed suit. And two of them didn't make it. So two of my older brothers, one was 7 years older than me, the other was 13 years older than me, and one used to overdose quite often, quite regularly through his young life, and I had a lot of brain damage because of it, and he messed his life up completely. He used to end up in prison on purpose to get off the streets because he lived in Canada. It was really cold up here, and he'd be on the streets in the wintertime with nowhere to go, and he sometimes would rob a bank unarmed just to get some jail time, to get some prison time so he could dry out and stay warm. And that's how awful his life was. He used to get mugged and rolled, and he would drug overdose, and he would pass out in the snow, and he lost a bunch of fingers because of that. And he just had such a hard life. And that's my brother, and I mean, I look at the situation of what the abuse that he grew up in was the abuse that I grew up in, and we were abused as children, all of us, in a horrible situation. And I know why he did what he did, but he made the wrong choice, and he died of a drug overdose in a shelter here in Calgary, where I live now. I wasn't here at the time. I was down in New Mexico, but he died at the age of like 30, I think 34 years old. Finally killed him. He was on a road to death for many years, and he was, basically just dying, all the time, really. His life was he was just always headed in the wrong direction. And, for so many people, this is such a huge issue. I knew so many kids growing up who also were, because of what I was doing. I mean, I was hanging around with drug users because I was a young teen, preteen, and then a teenager hanging around with drug users. And some people in this group were heavy drug users, and I was one of them. And then another one of my siblings, who was 13 years older than me, committed a suicide. He was a cocaine addict, and he committed suicide at the age of, I was 20, he would have been 33. So he was 33 years old, and he was a cocaine addict, and he had such a hard time in life as well, maintaining his sanity. He was actually quite mentally disturbed, and was doing drugs probably from a very young age, and because of the abuse in our home. So there's my two brothers that died due to drug addiction and other problems. And I just know, so many people out there suffer with this, and I don't look down on these people that I see on the street. I actually look at them with compassion, because I know that they're heading for a very early grave if they don't change their ways. And it's so, people would say, well, why don't they just go and get help? It's like, well, until you've been in their shoes, it's easy to say that. It's a little harder than that. It's a huge issue for so many people. And I mean, I knew teens who, when I was a teenager, and a young, early, 19, 20-year-old, who really, sure, you wouldn't want to hang around with these people. They would be dangerous to hang around with. They would do crazy things. You just never knew, what to expect around them. It was the same with my brothers. And, drug addiction is a serious problem, because generally the people who are doing the drugs generally alienate everybody away from them, because their lives are out of control. I mean, they don't make good decisions. They do a lot of things based on their need for that drug, and on the fact that they cannot seem to function in this world, and feel that they need, for whatever reason, need that drug. A lot of times it's not just this issue of, I want to get high. There's many reasons why people use drugs. And just for me personally, I can really only speak for myself. I use drugs as a way of escape. It was a way of getting out from the abuse that I was suffering, because I could be high. And then didn't matter what was happening at my home, didn't matter what was happening to me, because I was high. I was somewhere else. I was having what I considered to be a better life on drugs with my friends than I was just in my own skin, because I could be different. I could be high, So it was a serious issue, and I'm glad that I got off the drugs, but I'm still addicted to cigarettes, and I have not been able to kick that one yet. And but I don't drink, and I don't drink on purpose, because I have an addictive personality, and I just cannot allow myself to drink. So I rarely touch alcohol. Once in a while I'll have a drink, but it's very minimal, because I don't allow myself to do it. And coffee and cigarettes are my thing. But a lot of my friends were affected by drug use, and I talked quite a bit about this stuff, and I'll name no names, but my friends, I mentioned their stories in the book La Vida Juvies that I wrote, and their names are changed in that book. But one of my friends was murdered in a drug deal gone wrong, and he was killed in his driveway. And he would have been about, maybe late 20s at the time, maybe early 30s, let's say. And we were young teens hanging around together. He was actually a he was doing a record deal with a band, and they were really good. They were considered to be like the new Metallica. They were headed someplace, but they were all, if not most of them, drug users, heavy duty drug users, and they did one album back in those days, one CD, and that was it. And his life was so screwed up because of the drugs. and he was a good friend of mine. And I just remember, you know, he was a good guy. He was a nice guy, and he actually had kind of a sort of a sad sort of a situation growing up, and I don't think he was really all that wanted at home, and he was kind of, you know, just sort of left on his own to sort of raise himself, you know, and it was a little difficult for him, and he ended up being a heavy duty drug user. And another friend of mine who was my best friend, actually, this girl that I knew and hung around with for years, her boyfriend was also heavily addicted to drugs, and he was shooting drugs up, and he would mix like concoctions and speedballs, and he would shoot them up, and he was getting to the point where he had such a huge like an abscess in his arm from shooting up that the doctor actually told him if he didn't stop he was going to die. And this is how bad of a problem he had. But this guy, I mean, being around this all the time, I mean, I grew up in an abusive home, basically made friends with other children who were abused, other teens and stuff, and younger teens, and we all kind of just, you know, hung around and did drugs together. We all pretty well came from sort of the similar types of homes. But this guy that was my friend's boyfriend, and the violence that was involved because of his drug use and the drinking that would go on, you know, we were all doing drugs, and none of us was innocent in that area. We'd be partying and doing drugs, and mainly cocaine and stuff like that, and meth and things. And, you know, he would get so high that he would pass out, and then he would wake up from his high, and he would become violent, and he would like beat up his girlfriend, beat me up. He beat me up a couple of times, actually, not badly, but just really could have killed me, actually. And but he was seriously injuring his girlfriend, and it was a serious, tragic mess. They ended up having a child together, and she eventually left him, which was, I was very thankful for, that she got away from him, because he was abused as a child horrifically, and him and his sister took their parents to court and actually won the case. And he was so severely abused, and he came from an alcoholic family, and him and his sister became drug users at a very young age, and they continued on, and I have no idea where they are today. No clue. And even my best friend from then, that girl that I hung around with for years and slept on her couch quite often, she was you know, not really like him using drugs like that, shooting up or anything, but she was a drug user, and the two of us were, and I don't have a clue where she is. You know, these people are gone out of my life, and I have no idea what happened to them. Their lives were pretty harsh, and I had to get away from it. At the age of 21, I made a decision, because my brother had committed suicide when I was 20. He was 33, and he was a cocaine addict, and he committed suicide, and I knew that I was heading down sort of the same path. You know, I thought, I'm just going to be dead in a drug overdose somewhere. I'm going to just be dead in the gutter somewhere. Like, I could see my life ahead of me. I could see the path that I was on, and I could see that I was making all the wrong choices. I was working. I didn't steal money. Like, I didn't steal for drugs, especially when I got older and I had a job. I always had 2 or 3 jobs. I never slept. I was just always up. And, well, I did sleep sometimes, but I was always up, and I really damaged my health, I think, and my health went really downhill. Started just kind of losing weight, not sleeping, not eating, just doing a lot of speed, and not looking after myself very well. And, you know, I knew that I was headed for a bad situation if I continued on. So I actually had to separate from my friends, unfortunately, because I knew that if I hung around with them, I'd continue to do what I was going to do, because I wasn't strong enough to say no. And so, you know, I had to back off and back away from the friendship. And, you know, it's not like I didn't talk to them or anything, but our friendship definitely, you know, sort of grew cold, because I wasn't hanging around with them anymore. And I just couldn't take any more of the violence either. Like, just the violence. I grew up in a violent home, and I grew up witnessing violence, being part of violence, and then to move into my teens and move into my 20s and stuff with more violence, I got really tired of it, and I just thought, there has to be something else. You know, there has to be something else. And I know for so many people out there, you know, who are struggling right now, like this young man that we know, I don't personally know him, I just know him through a great friend of mine, my dear friend. And this young man, I mean, he's having so many troubles. Like, will he even make it? Like, will he make it? Will he make a decision that's going to save his life. And that's the decision that he's going to have to make, because if he doesn't make that decision, at some point, then really it's just death. Because drug abuse, drug use like that, when you're addicted to drugs, it just leads to death, really, unless you can get off of them, and a person to try to get off of them on their own is very difficult, and it's not easy to do. And so, my heart just goes out to, two of my brothers killed themselves. There you go. We couldn't say anything to them that would change their mind. We couldn't get them to feel any different about themselves. My siblings I'm talking about, my parents didn't care about any of us, so my parents didn't try to help them, but they say that they did, but we all know the truth, like my other siblings that are still alive. My brothers really were on their own, and they had so many troubles that my parents didn't want them around, especially when they got older, and didn't want us anyway, but they certainly didn't want them around causing trouble with the drug use and stuff. But, it's like, what can you say? My brother, when he was the one that died of a drug overdose in a shelter there, he wanted to come home for Christmas, and this was just like, a year before, well, actually, a few months before he died. And he had called home. He was in Canada, and we were down in the States, and he called, and he was talking to me on the phone, and he said, I just want to come home for Christmas. And I don't know, why he was thinking some sort of, that there might, that in his memories we had good Christmases together or something, because our family was abusive, and it wasn't that great. You know what I mean? But it was all he had. And I think he was just wishing, that my mom would love him, my mom would care about him, and just wishing that things would have been different, and that he could come back, and that she would tell him all the right things that she should have told him when he was young, that she loved him, and that she did want him, and that she cared about him, And I know that, I'm sure that's what it was, because I went through that later too. And my mom was just not capable. Both my parents were diagnosed psychologically ill, and they were both abused as children, and they were both abusive towards us. So it was a horrible situation. And my brother was just, I think he was just grasping for his last bit of hope, And my mom wouldn't let him come home down to New Mexico. She wouldn't pay for a ticket for him to come down. And I told her, I said, I'll go halfers on the ticket. I didn't have very much money, but I said, I'll go halfers on his plane ticket so he can come down just to see you for 2 weeks, just to be here with us. And my mom was like, no, he can't come here. He'll just cause problems for me. And that was Christmas. And then in April, he died of a drug overdose in a shelter. And I thought about that when we got the news that he died. I was like, my bro was probably one of the saddest people on this planet. He was one of the most alone people on this planet. And my heart just broke. I was just devastated. It's a harsh thing for so many people who are out there, who for whatever reason have gotten mixed up in this drug thing, and they just can't see a way out. I was sitting around 7 years ago. I tell this quite often, this story, but this is really the truth, and this is what happened to me. 7 years ago, well, actually, it was May 22nd, 2007, so it would have been probably March that this happened to me, March. I was sitting around wanting to self-injure and wanting to kill myself. I was suicidal, and not really suicidal. I wouldn't attempt suicide. I was just always thinking about it and planning it. And I had several hundred different plans and ways of doing it, and which I don't go into detail. And I just wanted out of the pain, the pain of this, was free from the drugs. That's great, but I wasn't free from the pain that I used to mask with drugs, see? And this pain was still there at the age of 42, and I was still in so much pain, and just from the abuse and the lack of care and concern and the lack of love, and just the lack that so many people need this. They need love, they need care, they need concern, and they don't get it. And I was just so, as always, in such a down situation that, I couldn't see any way to go on. And two of my brothers killed themselves. Like I said, one was suicide. The other was, and he was quite often trying to commit suicide. So it's not like he just tried once and it was an accident or something. He had tried several times and actually finally made it. And this other brother that died in the shelter of a drug overdose, he had overdosed so many times, he really was just trying to kill himself. I don't think that he cared if he did so many drugs he would just die, because that's what I used to do. And I used to just do so many drugs, I didn't care if I woke up or not. And it's a harsh situation for so many. And I was sitting there on the couch and I didn't know how I was going to make it. And I just listened to this little voice on this one side of my shoulder saying, "Choose life. Choose life." And I could hear it, and I was like, "Oh," because I wanted to end it. I was so tired and I was so burnt out, just burnt right out and so down and just thinking, I don't know how I can go on. So I know I've been there, man, and it's tough. It's a hard place to be. And I just realized that, yeah, like, this is, who am I benefiting if I hurt myself? Who am I benefiting nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to care if I hurt myself or kill myself. No, nobody. The people that should have cared about me, which would be my parents and my family, aren't going to care, And I thought, well, then why am I doing this? Because the world doesn't care, So why am I doing this? And I had to sit and think about it, and I kept hearing this little voice, choose life, choose life. And I thought, that's right. I'm going to fight this thing, and I'm going to live. This is my victory, man. I'm going to live, and I'm going to make it. I'm going to get help. And that's that same little voice that was telling me back when I was 21 years old to get off the drugs, when my brother committed suicide, and I was, he sexually abused me and stuff. And I don't, I have some serious problems with him, but the thing is I didn't want him to suffer. He suffered as a child greatly at the hands of my dad, and what he did to me was wrong, but I still, as a person, had compassion, and enough compassion to realize that he had such a horrible life, and well, so did I. But the thing is I cared, right? And so, when he died, I was pretty devastated. I was like, that was my parents' fault. I blamed my parents for it. I literally told them to their face. I said, "This is your fault. I'm sorry, but this suicide is your fault. You caused it because you caused him to be such a sick individual that he couldn't even get his act straight and couldn't even live." My parents actually really they were both suicidal, and they kind of caused us to want to die, right? And it was from a very young age. And so, just from the abuse and the torture and the torment and just the complete destroying of our souls and our spirits, And I knew where my brother was, when he killed himself, and I was just like, I'm heading down the same road. And when I got off the drugs, it was that little voice saying, "Choose life." I do want to live. That little voice inside of me was saying, I do want to live. I do, And then 42, at the age of 42, 22 years later, I'm sitting on the couch ready to, wanting to end my life because I was in so much pain. I wasn't doing drugs anymore, but the pain was still there. And, and something just kept telling me, choose life. Choose life. And so, really, that's my message to you and to anybody out there who's struggling with addiction, with, suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, whatever it is you're struggling with, you choose life. Do not let this destroy you. That's what I said. I started getting a fire underneath of me that just lit up, and I was like, oh my God, this is my victory, because I'm not going to let them destroy me. Because that's what I was doing when I was doing the drugs. I was just hurting myself more because of what my parents did to me. And, and what my brother did to me. This is just wanting to hurt myself and damage myself more. Then I found myself at the age of 42 wanting to do the same thing with a screwdriver, trying to self-injure. And it's like, I thought, what am I doing? Oh my God, choose life. You do not be destroyed. Do not let yourself be destroyed by drugs or anybody else. My message is, you find help. You find help. You go and you find help, and you keep looking until you find the person or the people that are going to work with you and help you get where you need to be. Because there are good people out there. Probably haven't run into too many of them if you've been like me in the past, just growing up abused and just so many problems. You know what? There are good people out there, but they won't help you unless you're willing to help yourself. They aren't going to reach out. You got to reach out, and you have to make the step, and you have to do the work. And it's a lot of work. It's taken me 7 years to get where I am today. And like I said, by the grace of God, I'm a Christian, and I believe it's truly by the grace of God that I'm sitting here tonight and not not somewhere in the morgue somewhere, right, or in the ground, right? So I'm telling you, choose life. Look for that help where you can find it. Do not ever give up. Do not ever. Do not ever give up. Do not allow that to be an option. Just don't do it. You hang in there, and I don't care how hard it gets and how hard it hurts. You hang in there for a better day, and you choose life, and you do the right thing, and you get yourself some help. Because so many times people who have been abused and who are doing drugs and on drugs just weren't looked after right. They don't even know how to get help. You just have to keep looking until you find somebody that's trustworthy that can help you, and do not ever give up, right? So that's my main message, man. Don't ever give up and choose life. Here's a song called Alone by XY. The first one was Promises by XY as well. And God bless you. And, I'm with you in my heart, and I'm just praying, that you'll reach out and that you'll get some help, because I'm a person that cares. I know there's a lot of people out there that do care, and you have to care about yourself. And that's what I started to do, was I started to care about myself. And that made all the difference, because I needed to learn how to love myself. And you really, you have to do that. You have to go through that part and learn to accept yourself, and learn to get help, and realize that you do deserve it, because no one deserves to be treated horribly, and nobody deserves to be on the street just their lives just hanging in the breeze. Like, you really deserve better than that, and you need to make sure that you reach out and get the help and get resources, find people that will help you, right? God bless you all. Have a good night.
Trying to keep this fire burning inside my heart and in my mind. Each day we're sharing things you can see deep in my eyes, that I am so ready to fight. The strange reflections when I was a child, it always happened alone in my room. There are many shadows dancing all around me. Away from this world is the freedom is there.